The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers as those words hung in the humid Georgia air. Mrs. Catherine Williams stood behind me in her silk blouse and pencil skirt, looking nothing like the desperate woman who'd called my shop 3 hours earlier. Her broken-down Mercedes wasn't the only thing that needed fixing that afternoon. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra. Special for you. My name is Jonathan Pierce, and at 24, I thought I had life figured out. Fresh out of technical college with a certification in automotive repair, I'd opened Pierce Auto Works in the small town of Millfield, Georgia, with nothing but a dream and my grandfather's old toolbox. The shop was barely making ends meet, but I was determined to build something meaningful with my hands. That Tuesday started like any other. The October heat was still clinging to the south, making the concrete floor of my garage feel like a furnace. I was elbow deep in the engine of Mr. Henderson's pickup truck when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Pierce Auto Works, this is Jonathan speaking. Oh, thank goodness someone answered. The voice was refined, with just a hint of southern drawl. My car broke down on Highway 47, just past the old cotton mill. I'm Catherine Williams. Could you possibly help me? I glanced at the clock. 2:30 p.m. Mr. Henderson's truck could wait another hour. What kind of car are we talking about, ma'am? It's a 2018 Mercedes C-Class. The engine just died. I was driving to Atlanta for a business meeting and now I'm stranded. A Mercedes. That was definitely outside my usual wheelhouse of beaten-up Chevys and Fords, but money was money. I'll be right there, Mrs. Williams. Should take me about 15 minutes. I loaded my mobile toolkit into my beat-up Ford F-150 and headed out toward Highway 47. The old cotton mill had been abandoned for decades, leaving that stretch of road pretty desolate. As I crested the hill, I spotted the silver Mercedes pulled over on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking. The woman standing beside it made me do a double take. Catherine Williams was nothing like what I'd expected from her voice. She was tall, probably around 5'7", with auburn hair pulled back in a professional bun. Her navy business suit looked expensive, the kind you'd see in magazine advertisements. But what struck me most were her eyes. Green as summer leaves, with a tiredness that seemed to run deeper than just car trouble. "Mr. Pierce?" she asked as I climbed out of my truck. "Yes, ma'am. You can call me Jonathan." I grabbed my toolkit and approached the Mercedes. What exactly happened when it died? I was driving along, everything was normal, when suddenly the engine started making this terrible grinding noise. Then it just stopped. All the dashboard lights came on at once. She wrung her hands, and I noticed she wasn't wearing a wedding ring, though there was a pale band of skin where one might have been. I popped the hood and immediately smelled burning oil. The engine bay was pristine, clearly well maintained, but I could see the problem right away. The serpentine belt had snapped, taking out the alternator in the process. "Well, I've got good news and bad news," I said, wiping my hands on a shop rag. "The good news is it's fixable. The bad news is I'll need to tow it back to my shop. This isn't a roadside repair." Her face fell. "How long will that take? I really need to get to Atlanta tonight." "Probably a couple hours once I get the parts. The serpentine belt I can get locally, but the alternator, that might take some hunting." She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, there was something vulnerable there that hadn't been before. "I suppose I don't have much choice, do I? I'm sorry, ma'am. I know it's not what you wanted to hear. Please call me Catherine. And it's not your fault." She managed a weak smile. "Things have been falling apart left and right lately. I guess I should have expected this." As I hooked up the tow chains, Catherine climbed into my truck's passenger seat. The cab suddenly felt smaller with her in it, filled with the scent of her perfume. Something floral and expensive that was completely at odds with the motor oil and coffee stains that usually dominated the space. "So you own the shop?" she asked, as we pulled back onto the highway. "Yes, ma'am. Well, me and the bank anyway." I tried to keep my tone light. "Opened it about 8 months ago." "That's impressive. Starting your own business so young takes courage." I glanced over at her. She was studying me with those green eyes, and I felt heat rise in my cheeks that had nothing to do with the Georgia sun. "My grandfather always said, if you're good with your hands, you'll never go hungry. Course he didn't mention anything about keeping the lights on. That earned me a genuine laugh. Money troubles? Nothing I can't handle, I said quickly, not wanting to sound like I was fishing for sympathy. Just the usual growing pains of a new business. We rode in comfortable silence for a few minutes before she spoke again. Can I ask you something, Jonathan? Sure. Do you ever feel like you're stuck? Like no matter what you do, you can't seem to get ahead? The question caught me off guard. Here was this sophisticated woman in her expensive clothes asking me about feeling stuck. Sometimes, I admitted, though I imagine it's different for someone like you. Someone like me, you know. Successful. Put together. I gestured vaguely at her outfit. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Appearances can be deceiving, Jonathan. Trust me on that. Back at the shop, I got the Mercedes up on the lift while Catherine waited in my small office area. I'd tried to make it welcoming. A couple of mismatched chairs, a coffee maker that was older than me, and some magazines I'd picked up from the barber shop. But seeing it through her eyes, I realized how shabby it all looked. The alternator was definitely fried, and I'd need to special order one from Atlanta. I walked back to break the news, but stopped short when I saw her through the office window. She was sitting with her head in her hands, shoulders shaking slightly. The composed businesswoman facade had cracked, revealing something raw underneath. I knocked gently on the doorframe. Catherine, everything all right? She looked up quickly, wiping at her eyes. I'm fine. Just tired. It's been a long day. The alternator's going to take until tomorrow to get here, I said softly. I called around, but nobody local stocks parts for Mercedes. Of course they don't. She laughed bitterly. Story of my life lately. I pulled up the other chair and sat down across from her. You want to talk about it? Sometimes it helps to tell a stranger. For a moment, I thought she was going to shut down again. But then something shifted in her expression, and the words started pouring out. I just finalized my divorce last month, she said, staring at her hands. 22 years. Of marriage gone. He left me for his secretary. How's that for a cliché? The business meeting in Atlanta? It's with a lawyer about selling our house. I can't afford to keep it on my own. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. The worst part is, I saw it coming. Had been seeing it for years, really. But I kept thinking if I just tried harder, worked more, looked better, cooked his favorite meals. God, I sound pathetic. You don't sound pathetic. You sound human. She looked up at me then, really looked at me, and I felt something electric pass between us. You're very kind, Jonathan, and wise for someone so young. I'm 24, not 12, I said with a grin, trying to lighten the mood. 24, she repeated softly. I have shoes older than that. We both laughed, and some of the tension broke, but there was still something hanging in the air between us, something I couldn't quite name. Can I buy you dinner? She asked suddenly, as a thank you for going out of your way to help me. I glanced at the clock. It was almost 7, and I hadn't eaten since breakfast. There's not much fine dining in Millfield, I'm afraid. I don't need fine dining. I just need good company. The way she said it made my heart skip a beat. Catherine Williams was beautiful, intelligent, and completely out of my league. But sitting there in my shabby office with grease under my fingernails and motor oil stains on my shirt, I felt like maybe, just maybe, league tables didn't matter as much as I'd always thought. There's a diner down the street that makes the best apple pie in 3 counties, I offered. Perfect, she said, and when she smiled, it was like the sun coming out after a storm. Ruby's diner hadn't changed since I was a kid. The red vinyl booths were cracked in all the same places. The jukebox still played Patsy Cline on repeat. And Ruby herself still worked the evening shift despite being well into her 70s. But walking in with Catherine felt like seeing the place through new eyes. Ruby raised an eyebrow as we slid into a corner booth. In a town like Millfield, word traveled fast, and I could already imagine the phone calls that would be made before we finished our coffee. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Catherine seemed oblivious to the curious stares, studying the laminated menu with the Same intensity she might give a legal contract. "So what's good here?" she asked, pulling her hair loose from its professional bun. The auburn waves cascaded past her shoulders, softening her features. "Everything, honestly. Ruby's been cooking the same recipes for 40 years. The meatloaf's legendary. But if you want something lighter, her chicken salad is pretty amazing." "Meatloaf. It is. When in Rome." She smiled, and I noticed tiny laugh lines around her eyes that made her seem more approachable somehow. Ruby shuffled over with her order pad, giving Catherine a thorough once-over. "Well, well, Jonathan Pierce, you didn't tell me you had such elegant company coming by. Ruby, this is Catherine Williams. Her car broke down, so I'm helping her out." "Mm-hmm." Ruby's knowing look made my cheeks burn. "And what can I get you? Folks?" After we ordered, Catherine leaned back in the booth and looked around the diner. "This place has character. How long have you been coming here?" "Since I was about 10. My mom used to bring me here every Friday after school. Ruby would sneak me extra ice cream with my pie." The memory hit me unexpectedly. Mom passed away when I was 16. Cancer. Catherine's expression softened. "I'm so sorry, Jonathan. That must have been incredibly difficult." It was. Dad took it pretty hard, too. He's never really been the same since. I fidgeted with my napkin. "That's actually part of why I opened the shop here instead of moving to Atlanta or somewhere bigger. He needs family close by." "That's admirable. A lot of young men your age would have run toward the bright lights of the big city. Trust me, the thought crossed my mind plenty of times, especially when I'm lying awake at 3 a.m. wondering how I'm going to pay rent on the shop." I laughed, but it came out more bitter than I intended. Business really is that tight? I hesitated. Something about Catherine made me want to be honest, maybe more honest than was smart. "Let's just say if I don't turn things around in the next few months, I might not have a choice about that big city move." Ruby appeared with our plates, setting down generous portions that could feed a small family. Catherine stared at her meatloaf with wide eyes. "Ruby doesn't believe in small portions," I explained. "I can see that." She took a bite, and her eyes practically rolled back. "Oh my God, this is incredible. Told you so." We ate in comfortable silence for a while, the tension from earlier slowly melting away. Catherine had loosened up considerably since we'd left the shop. Her jacket was draped over the back of the booth, and she'd rolled up her sleeves, revealing delicate wrists and forearms that were surprisingly tanned. "Can I ask you something?" she said, cutting another piece of meatloaf. "Shoot." "Earlier, when you said appearances can be deceiving, what did you mean?" I set down my fork, considering how to answer. "I guess I meant that you seem to have it all figured out. Successful career, nice clothes, fancy car. But then you said you felt stuck, and I realized maybe we're not so different after all." "You think I have it all figured out?" She laughed, shaking her head. "Jonathan, I'm 40 years old, newly divorced, about to lose my house, and my career is hanging by a thread. If this is having it figured out, I'd hate to see what failure looks like." "What kind of work do you do?" "Marketing. Consultant, or I was anyway. My ex-husband and I ran the business together. Guess who got to keep the company in the divorce?" She stabbed at her mashed potatoes with more force than necessary. "That's rough. The worst part is, it was my idea originally. I built that client base, developed those strategies. But everything was in his name because I was young and stupid and thought love meant trust." She looked up at me with those green eyes. "Sorry, I don't usually dump my problems on strangers. Hey, you bought me dinner. I figure that entitles you to at least one good venting session." That earned me another smile. "You have a way of making things seem less catastrophic than they are. Gift and a curse, according to my dad." Ruby stopped by to refill our coffee, her eagle eyes not missing the way Catherine had relaxed in the past hour. "How's that meatloaf treating you, honey?" "It's the best I've ever had," Catherine said sincerely. "Well, aren't you sweet?" "Jonathan, you better hold on to this one. She's got good taste." Ruby winked and moved on to the next table, leaving me mortified and Catherine blushing. "Sorry about that," I mumbled. "Ruby thinks she's everyone's grandmother." It's endearing. In my world, nobody says what they're really thinking. Everything's calculated, diplomatic. There's something refreshing about honest affection. "You're World sounds exhausting. It was, especially toward the end. She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. Do you know what the worst part about getting divorced is, Jonathan? I shook my head. It's not the lawyers or the paperwork, or even dividing up 22 years of accumulated stuff. It's realizing that you've become someone you don't recognize. I spent so many years being the perfect corporate wife, the perfect business partner, the perfect hostess at dinner parties. I lost track of who Catherine actually was underneath all of that. So who is she? Catherine, I mean. She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the diner's window at the darkening street. I used to paint. Did you know that? I was actually pretty good at it too. Had a few pieces in local galleries when I was in college. What happened to that? Life happened. Marriage happened. Richard thought art was a nice hobby, but not practical for building a future. Her voice had gone soft, almost wistful. I gave up a lot of things I loved because they didn't fit the image we were trying to project. It's not too late to pick it back up, isn't it? I'm 40 years old, Jonathan. Most people my age have already figured out their lives. Most people my age think they have their lives figured out. And look how that's working for me, I said, gesturing around the diner. Maybe the point isn't having it all figured out. Maybe it's just figuring it out as you go. She studied my face with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. You're remarkably wise for 24. Or remarkably naive. The jury's still out. We both laughed, and I felt that electric connection again, stronger this time. There was something happening between us. Something I didn't fully understand but couldn't ignore either. What about you? She asked. What did you want to be when you grew up? Before life got in the way? This, actually. I know it probably sounds boring compared to painting or running a marketing firm, but I've always loved working with my hands. There's something satisfying about taking something broken and making it work again. That doesn't sound boring at all. It sounds purposeful. Even when the purpose barely pays the bills? Especially then. Do you know how many people I know who make 6 figures but hate getting up in the morning? Money isn't everything, Jonathan. Easy to say when you've had it, and easy to dismiss when you haven't. She reached across the table and touched my hand briefly, sending a jolt through my entire arm. I'm sorry. That came out wrong. I just meant that what you're doing, building, something meaningful with your own hands, that's rare. Don't underestimate the value of that. Ruby appeared with the check, setting it down pointedly in front of me despite Catherine's protests. Dinner's on the house tonight, she announced. Consider it a welcome to Millfield gift. Catherine started to object, but Ruby held up a weathered hand. No arguments, honey. Jonathan here's good people, and anyone who appreciates good meatloaf is all right by me. As we walked back toward the shop, the evening air had cooled considerably. Catherine wrapped her arms around herself, and without thinking, I shrugged out of my jacket and draped it over her shoulders. Thank you, she said softly. For dinner, for the jacket, for listening. It's been a long time since someone just listened. Thank you for the company. It beats eating a gas station sandwich alone in the shop. We stopped in front of my truck, and suddenly the evening felt suspended, like we were both waiting for something to happen. Catherine looked up at me, and, in the glow of the streetlight, she looked younger somehow. Vulnerable. Jonathan, she said quietly, you're so young and handsome, and I'm already 40. The words hung between us like a question, like a warning, like a confession all rolled into one. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire, charged with possibilities and fears. Catherine's words echoed in my head. You're so young and handsome, and I'm already 40, and I found myself stepping closer instead of backing away. Catherine, I said softly, age is just a number. She shook her head but didn't step back. Is it? Jonathan, I have 16 years on you. When you were learning to drive, I was already married. When you were in high school, I was building a business. And when I was learning to fix engines, you were painting. When I was figuring out who I wanted to be, you were becoming someone else's idea of perfect. I reached up and gently touched her cheek. Maybe we're exactly where we're supposed to be right now. Her breath caught, and for a moment I thought she might pull away. Instead, she leaned into my touch, closing her eyes. "This is crazy," she whispered. The best things usually are. When she opened her eyes, there was something different there. A spark of the woman she'd been before life taught her to be careful. "I should get a hotel room. Start fresh tomorrow when the car's ready. The nearest hotel is 30 miles away. You could stay at my place." The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "I mean, I have a couch, nothing inappropriate. Just, it's been a long day." She studied my face in the streetlight, searching for something. "Just the couch?" "Just the couch," I confirmed, though every fiber of my being hoped she might change her mind. My apartment was above the auto shop, accessible through a narrow staircase that led to a small landing. I'd never been self-conscious about the modest space before, but suddenly I was seeing it through Catherine's eyes. The second-hand furniture, the stack of automotive magazines on the coffee table, the refrigerator that hummed too loudly. "It's not much," I said, flicking on the lights. "It's perfect," she said, and something in her tone made me believe she meant it. "It feels like a home. Can I get you something to drink? I've got beer, water, or coffee that's questionable at best." "Beer. Sounds good." I grabbed 2 bottles from the refrigerator and handed her one. She'd settled onto the couch, looking smaller somehow in my oversized jacket. The professional woman from this afternoon seemed like a different person entirely. "Tell me about your grandfather," she said out of nowhere. "What about him? You mentioned his toolbox earlier. He taught you about fixing things?" I sat down beside her, careful to leave space between us. "He was a mechanic in the Navy during Vietnam. Came back and worked on farm equipment for 40 years. He used to say that everything broken could be fixed if you had the right tools and enough patience." Sounds like a wise man. He was. He's the one who taught me that working with your hands wasn't something to be ashamed of, that there was honor in fixing what was broken. I took a swig of beer. "He died when I was 20. Left me his tools and a letter telling me to follow my dreams, even if they seemed small to other people." Catherine was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What did the letter say exactly?" I got up and walked to the small desk by the window, pulling out a worn envelope from the top drawer. The paper was yellowed with age, creased from being folded and unfolded countless times. I handed it to her. "You don't have to read it out loud," I said quickly. "It's just..." He had a way with words, but she was already reading, her lips moving silently as she absorbed his careful script. When she finished, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "The world will try to convince you that dreams have to be big to matter. But the truth is that the smallest dreams, the ones that make you wake up excited to work, those are the ones that change everything." She smiled, wiping at her eyes. "He sounds like he really understood you. Better than I understood myself sometimes." I sat back down, this time closer to her. "What about you? Did you have someone like that?" "My grandmother. She was the one who taught me to paint. She used to say that art wasn't about creating something beautiful. It was about creating something true." Catherine's voice grew wistful. "She died right before I got married. Sometimes I wonder if she would have approved of the choices I made." "What do you think?" "I think she would have been disappointed. Not in me, but in how I let other people's expectations become more important than my own truth." The vulnerability in her admission hit me like a physical blow. Without thinking, I reached over and took her hand. Her fingers were cold despite the warm evening. "It's not too late to change that," I said. "Isn't it? I'm starting over at 40 with nothing but a car that doesn't run, and a suitcase full of clothes that don't feel like me anymore. You have more than that. You have experience, intelligence, talent, and you have the courage to start over, which is more than most people ever manage." She turned to face me fully, and I could see the internal battle playing out in her expression. "Jonathan, I need to be honest with you about something." My stomach clenched. "Okay. I'm attracted to you. More attracted than I should be. More than makes sense. But I'm also terrified of taking advantage of your kindness, of dragging you into my mess." What if it's not taking advantage? What if it's just two people who found each other at exactly the right moment? You make it sound simple. Maybe it is. Maybe we complicate things because we think we're supposed to. She was quiet for a long moment, then stood up abruptly. I should go to bed. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. I felt the moment slipping away and scrambled to my feet. Catherine, wait! She turned back, and I could see the war between what she wanted and what she thought she should do playing out on her face. I know this is complicated, I said. I know people will talk. I know it doesn't make sense on paper. But I also know that I haven't felt this connected to someone in, well, maybe ever. And I think you feel it too. I do, she whispered. That's what scares me. Why? Because I've spent the last 22 years in a relationship that looked perfect from the outside but was empty on the inside. I don't want to hurt you, Jonathan. You deserve someone who can give you everything, not someone who's still figuring out who she is. What if I don't want everything? What if I just want this? Honest conversations, shared dinners, someone who sees me for who I am instead of who I should be. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them, there was a new resolve there. You're going to think I'm crazy. Try me. I want to kiss you, right now. But I also want to do this right, whatever this is. I want to take it slow. Figure out if what we're feeling is real, or just two lonely people finding comfort in each other. My heart was racing, but I forced myself to nod. We can take it slow. Can we? Really? Because I'm not sure I trust myself around you. The admission hung between us, honest and raw. I stepped closer, close enough to smell her perfume, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. Then let's start with something simple, I said, reaching up to cup her face in my hands. Let's start with trust. And then I kissed her, soft and gentle, a promise rather than a demand. She melted into me for just a moment before pulling back, breathless. That's your idea of taking it slow? She asked, but she was smiling. Baby steps, I said, grinning back. She laughed, the sound bright and real. I haven't been called a baby in years. Get used to it. The next morning, I woke up on the couch with a crick in my neck and the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamed the entire evening. But then I heard Catherine humming softly. An old song I didn't recognize, but that sounded like happiness. Good morning, she called when she heard me stirring. I hope you don't mind that I made coffee. Your machine is older than my marriage, but it still works. I stretched and padded to the kitchen, where she was standing at the stove wearing one of my old college t-shirts over her skirt from yesterday. Her hair was tousled, her makeup gone, and she looked more beautiful than she had in her business suit. Sleep well? I asked. Better than I have in months. Your couch is surprisingly comfortable. Glad to hear it. I accepted the mug she handed me, our fingers brushing in the exchange. I called the parts supplier this morning. Your alternator should be here by noon, so I'll be out of your hair by this afternoon. What if I don't want you out of my hair? Gyosa turned to face me, a coffee mug cradled in her hands. What are you saying, Jonathan? I'm saying maybe your car breaking down wasn't the worst thing that could have happened. Maybe it was exactly what we both needed. The parts supplier arrived at 11:47 a.m., 13 minutes ahead of schedule. I watched through the shop window as the delivery truck pulled away, the new alternator sitting on my workbench like a countdown timer. Once I installed it, Catherine would have no reason to stay in Millfield. The thought hit me harder than I expected. You look like someone just told you Christmas was canceled, Catherine said from behind me. She'd spent the morning helping organize my chaotic paperwork system, transforming my disaster of a filing cabinet into something that actually made sense. Just thinking about the repair, I lied. She walked over and picked up the alternator, turning it over in her hands with surprising familiarity. My father was a mechanic. I spent a lot of summers in his shop when I was a kid. She smiled at the memory. He always said the alternator was the heart of the electrical system. Without it, nothing else matters. Smart man. He was. He would have liked you. She set the part down and looked at me directly. Jonathan, we need to talk about what happens after you fix my car. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? I mean that last night was wonderful, and this morning feels like something out of a dream. But we both know I can't hide in Millfield forever. I have a house to sell, a life to sort out. Reality is waiting for me in Atlanta. I nodded, trying to look understanding while my chest felt like it was caving in. Of course, I get it. Do you? Because you have that look on your face like you're already planning my goodbye. Aren't you? She was quiet for a moment, then walked to the front window of the shop. Outside, Millfield was going about its Wednesday business. Mrs. Patterson, walking her ancient beagle, Tommy Rodriguez delivering mail, the usual rhythm of small-town life. Can I tell you something? She said without turning around. Always. I've been living other people's dreams for so long that I forgot what mine felt like. But last night, sitting in that diner with you, listening to you talk about your grandfather and your dreams for this place, I remembered. Remember what? What it feels like to want something for myself. Not because it looks good on paper or because someone else expects it, but because it makes me happy. She turned back to me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You make me happy, Jonathan. In one day, you've made me happier than I've been in years. Catherine, let me finish. I know this is complicated. I know people will have opinions about us. The age difference, how fast this is happening, all of it. But I also know that I'm tired of living my life based on what other people think. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear myself. Think. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe I don't have to go back to Atlanta today. Maybe I could stay a few more days, see how this feels when it's not just one magical evening. What about your house, the lawyer? The house will still need to be sold whether I'm there or not, and lawyers are very good at handling things over the phone. She stepped closer to me. The question is whether you want me to stay. Are you serious? Of course I want you to stay. I was trying to figure out how to ask without sounding desperate. She laughed, the sound bright in the echoing space of the garage. Well, that settles it then. I'm officially extending my stay. In Millfield. Where will you stay? Ruby's Diner doesn't exactly run a bed and breakfast. I was hoping you might have a suggestion. The implication hung between us, heavy with possibility. Catherine, I don't want you to feel pressured. I don't. That's the point. For the first time in years, I'm making a choice based on what I want, not what I should do. She reached out and took my grease-stained hands in her clean ones. I want to stay. I want to see where this goes. I want to wake up tomorrow and the day after that without having every moment planned out in advance. My couch is pretty comfortable, I said, grinning. Your couch is terrible for my back. But your bed looked very inviting when I walked past it this morning. Heat flooded through me at her words. Catherine. Too fast, she asked, but there was mischief in her eyes. Not fast enough, I admitted. Before I could second-guess myself, I pulled her against me and kissed her properly this time. Not the gentle, cautious kiss from last night, but something deeper, hungrier. She responded immediately, her hands, fisting in my work shirt, pulling me closer. We might have stayed like that forever if the shop bell hadn't chimed, announcing a customer. We broke apart, breathless, to find old Mr. Henley standing in the doorway with his ancient pickup truck, keys in hand. Well, hello there, he said with a knowing grin. Hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Not at all, Mr. Henley, I said, trying to compose myself while Catherine smoothed her hair and attempted to look professional. What can I do for you? Truck's making that noise again. You know the one. I did know the one. Mr. Henley's 1987. Ford made approximately 17 different concerning noises, each of which he described as that noise, as if I were psychic. I'll take a look at it, I said. Might be this afternoon before I can get to it, though. No rush. I see you've got more pressing matters to attend to. He winked at Catherine, who blushed furiously. Ma'am, I hope you'll forgive an old man's curiosity, but you wouldn't happen to be the mysterious woman who had dinner with our Jonathan last night, would you? Word travels fast in small towns, Catherine said with a smile. Ruby Henderson tells everyone everything, whether they want to hear it or not. She said you appreciated her meatloaf. It was incredible. Well, anyone who appreciates Ruby's cooking is all right by me. Plus, it's about time this boy found himself a nice lady. Been too focused on work, if you ask me. Mr. Henley, I warned. But he was just getting started. You know, Jonathan here is one of the good ones. Honest as the day is long, works harder than anyone I know, and he's got a good heart. His mama raised him right, God rest her soul, Mr. Henley. Course, he's also stubborn as a mule and thinks he has to save the world all by himself, but I suppose that's part of his charm. Catherine was grinning now, clearly enjoying my embarrassment. He does seem to have a hero complex. That's exactly what I told his daddy just last week. Boy can't help himself from trying to fix everything. And everyone. All right, that's enough character assassination for one morning, I said. But I was smiling too. Mr. Henley, leave your keys and I'll call you when she's ready. Will do. Nice meeting you, miss. I hope we'll be seeing more of you around town. After he left, Catherine burst into laughter. Hero complex? Stubborn as a mule? Should I be concerned, Mr. Henley's been telling embarrassing stories about me since I was 12. Don't encourage him. I like him, and I like that people here care about you. Sometimes a little too much. By tonight, half the town will know you stayed the night. Scandalized by a woman sleeping on your couch? How delightfully old-fashioned. Wait until they find out you're not sleeping on the couch anymore. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Who says I'm not? Are you? Going to sleep on the couch, I mean. That depends entirely on how well you fix my car. I have very high standards for automotive repair. I laughed and pulled her back into my arms. Lucky for you, I'm very good with my hands. So I've heard. The alternator replacement took less than an hour, but I found myself working slower than usual, double-checking connections that didn't need checking, testing systems that were clearly functional. Catherine sat on a rolling stool beside me, handing me tools and asking surprisingly informed questions about the repair process. You really did spend time in your father's shop, I observed, as she correctly identified a voltage regulator. Every summer until I turned 16 and discovered boys were more interesting than carburetors. What changed your mind? About boys or carburetors? Both. She was quiet for a moment, then said, I think I forgot that working with your hands could be beautiful. Everything in my marriage was so sterile. Clean offices, perfect presentations, networking events where nobody actually said anything. Real. This, she gestured around the garage, this feels authentic. Even covered in motor oil? Especially covered in motor oil. I tightened the final connection and stepped back. Well, that should do it. Want to try starting her up? Catherine slid behind the wheel of the Mercedes and turned the key. The engine purred to life immediately, smooth and strong. She revved it a few times, grinning at the sound. Perfect, she said, climbing out. You really are good with your hands. So you'll be leaving now? I asked, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. Actually, I was thinking I might take a drive around town, see the sights, maybe find somewhere to stay for a few days. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to that intimate whisper again. Unless you know of somewhere I could stay where the beds are more comfortable than the couches. I might have a suggestion or two. Good, because I have a feeling I'm going to be very tired tonight. 3 days later, I woke up to the smell of bacon and the sound of Catherine singing softly in the kitchen. For a moment, I lay still, letting the reality sink in. She was still here, still choosing to be here. And somehow that felt more miraculous than anything I'd ever experienced. The past 3 days had been a whirlwind of discovery. Catherine had thrown herself into small-town life with an enthusiasm that surprised everyone, especially herself. She'd helped Mrs. Patterson untangle her ancient beagle from a garden hose, charmed Ruby into sharing her secret meatloaf recipe, and even convinced Tommy Rodriguez to let her help sort mail when his back gave out. But it was the quiet moments that meant the most. Working side by side in the shop, sharing stories over coffee, the way she fit perfectly against my side when we watched old movies on my tiny television. Every day felt like unwrapping a gift I'd never expected to receive. Good morning, sleepyhead, she called when she heard me stirring. I made breakfast, real breakfast, not your usual coffee and determination. I padded to the kitchen to find her standing at the stove wearing one of my flannel shirts over a pair of jeans she'd bought at Morrison's general store. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she looked completely at home in my tiny kitchen. You don't have to cook for me, I said, wrapping my arms around her waist from behind. I want to. Besides, I'm practicing domestic skills I haven't used in years. She leaned back into me. Richard had a housekeeper. I'd forgotten how satisfying it is to take care of someone you actually want to take care of. The casual mention of her ex-husband still stung a little, not from jealousy but from anger at how he'd treated her. Over the past few days, more details had emerged about her marriage. The gradual erosion of her confidence, the way he'd dismissed her dreams, the isolation she'd felt even when surrounded by people. Any regrets? I asked, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. About breakfast? Never. I make excellent bacon. About staying. She turned in my arms, her green eyes serious. Not for a second. What about you? Having second thoughts about harboring a refugee from corporate America? Only about 100 times a day. Her face fell slightly, and I immediately regretted my poor attempt at humor. I'm kidding, I said quickly. Catherine, these have been the best 3 days of my life. I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. What other shoe? The one where you remember you have a real life waiting for you somewhere else? She studied my face for a long moment, then turned off the stove and took my hands in hers. Jonathan, I need to tell you something. My stomach clenched. Here it was. The conversation I'd been dreading. I called my lawyer yesterday, she continued, and I told him to take the house off the market. I blinked, not sure I'd heard correctly. What? I'm not selling. I'm not going back to Atlanta. At least, not to live. She squeezed my hands. I want to make a life here. With you. If you'll have me. The words hit me like a physical blow. Catherine, are you sure? You barely know this place, barely know me. I know enough. I know that for the first time in 20 years, I wake up excited about the day ahead. I know that you make me laugh, that you listen when I talk, that you see me, really see me, not some image you want me to project. Her voice grew stronger with each word. I know that I'd rather struggle to build something real with you than live comfortably in a life that feels like a beautiful prison. What about your career? Your connections in Atlanta? What about them? Jonathan, I've spent 2 decades building a marketing company that sold people things they didn't need to impress people they didn't like. I want to do something that matters. Like what? I don't know yet. Maybe I'll paint again. Maybe I'll help you grow this business. Maybe I'll open an art studio downtown. The point is, I want to figure it out here, with you. I pulled her against me, burying my face in her hair. She smelled like my shampoo and bacon grease, and something uniquely. Catherine, a combination that was already becoming as familiar as home. Are you sure? I whispered. Really sure? Terrified and sure. Is that possible? If it is, then I'm right there with you. We might have stayed like that forever, but the shop bell downstairs chimed insistently. I groaned and reluctantly pulled. Away, duty calls, I said. I'll come with you. I want to see how you handle the morning rush. The morning rush turned out to be Dave Sullivan with a flat tire and a story about his ex-wife that took 20 minutes to tell. Catherine listened with rapt attention, asking follow-up questions and offering sympathy in all the right places. By the time Dave left, he was singing her praises loud enough for half the town to hear. You're good at that, I observed as we watched him drive away. At what? Making people feel heard, important. It's not hard when you actually care about their stories. Most people don't, though. Care, I mean. Maybe that's because most people are too busy worrying about their own stories to pay attention to anyone else's. She settled onto the stool beside my workbench. I spent so many years in rooms full of people who were all talking but nobody was really listening. This is different. The bell chimed again, and this time it was someone I'd been hoping to avoid. My father. Dad was a good man, but he had strong opinions about appropriate behavior, and I wasn't sure how he'd react to Catherine. Jonathan, he said, nodding curtly. His eyes went immediately to Catherine, taking in her casual clothes and comfortable posture with obvious surprise. Dad, I'd like you to meet Catherine Williams. Catherine, this is my father, Robert Pierce. Catherine, stood and extended her hand with a warm smile. "Mr. Pierce, it's wonderful to meet you. Jonathan's told me so much about you." Dad shook her hand, his expression carefully neutral. "Ms. Williams, I understand you've been staying in town for a few days." "I have. It's a lovely community. You should be proud of what Jonathan's built here." "I am." Dad's tone thawed slightly, at the praise for his son. "Though I have to admit, I'm curious about your arrangement." The word hung in the air like a challenge. I felt Catherine stiffen slightly beside me. "Dad," I warned. "It's all right, Jonathan." Catherine's voice remained steady. "Mr. Pierce, I understand your concern. If I were in your position, I'd want to protect my son too. All I can tell you is that my intentions toward Jonathan are completely honorable, and I hope that over time you'll come to see that." Dad studied her for a long moment, and I held my breath. Finally, his stern expression cracked slightly. "You've got backbone, I'll give you that. Most people would have gotten defensive. I'm not most people. No, I can see that." He looked between us, and I could practically see him reassessing the situation. "Jonathan, walk me out to my truck. I want to talk to you." Outside, Dad leaned against his pickup and crossed his arms. "She's older than you." "I know." "Divorced?" "Recently." "From Atlanta?" "Yes." He was quiet for a moment, staring out at the street. "Your mother was 3 years older than me, you know." I blinked in surprise. "I didn't know that." "Everyone said it wouldn't work. Said she was too sophisticated for a small-town boy like me. Said she'd get bored and leave." He smiled slightly. "Been married 31 years when she passed. Best years of my life." "Dad, I'm not saying age doesn't matter, son. I'm saying that what matters more is whether she makes you happy and whether you make her happy. From what I can see, the answer to both those questions is yes." Relief flooded through me. "So you approve?" "I approve of you being happy. I approve of you finding someone who looks at you the way she does. The rest, well, that's between you and her." He clapped me on the shoulder. "But if she hurts you, I'll have words with her." "I don't think that's going to be a problem." "Good, because I like her. She's got spirit." He climbed into his truck, then rolled down the window. "Bring her to Sunday dinner this week. Your mother's pot roast recipe isn't going to cook itself." As Dad drove away, I felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I hadn't realized how much his approval meant to me until I had it. Back inside, Catherine was organizing my inventory sheets with the same methodical precision she'd brought to everything else. "How did it go?" she asked without looking up. "Better than expected. He likes you." "Really?" "Because he looked like he wanted to interrogate me under bright lights." "That's just his way. He's protective." I sat down beside her. "He invited us to Sunday dinner." She looked up, surprised. That's wonderful. But are you sure he's ready for that?" "Are you?" "I'm ready for anything as long as it's with you." The simple honesty of her words took my breath away. 3 days ago, Catherine Williams had been a stranded stranger. Now she was talking about Sunday dinners and building a life together. And somehow it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Sunday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything in Millfield look like a postcard. Catherine spent an hour getting ready, changing outfits 3 times before settling on a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes. I'd never seen her nervous before, and the sight of her fidgeting with her earrings was both endearing and heartbreaking. "It's just dinner," I said, straightening my tie in the mirror. "It's not just dinner, and you know it. This is me meeting your family, being accepted into your world. What if he changes his mind about me? What if I say the wrong thing?" I turned and took her hands, stealing their nervous movement. "Catherine, my dad doesn't invite people to Sunday dinner unless he wants them there. Trust me, you've already passed the hard part." Which was? Convincing him I'm happy. We drove to Dad's house in comfortable silence, her hand resting on my thigh as I navigated the familiar streets. The house I'd grown up in sat on a tree-lined street that looked exactly the same as it had 20 years ago. White picket fences, porch swings, and the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else's business. Dad met us at the door wearing his good shirt, and a smile I hadn't seen since before Mom died. "Catherine, welcome. You look lovely." "Thank you for having me, Mr. Pierce. I brought dessert." She held up an apple pie she'd spent the morning making, following a recipe she'd found in one of my mother's old cookbooks. "You didn't have to do that, but I appreciate it. Come in, come in." The house smelled exactly like I remembered. Furniture polish, coffee, and the lingering scent of my mother's favorite candles. Dad had kept everything exactly as she'd left it, down to the stack of romance novels on her bedside table and the half-finished crossword puzzle still folded on the kitchen counter. "Can I help with anything?" Catherine asked, already rolling up her sleeves. "Nonsense. You're a guest. Jonathan, show her around while I finish up in the kitchen." I led Catherine through the house, pointing out family photos and sharing stories about my childhood. She listened with genuine interest, asking questions about my mother and laughing at my more embarrassing teenage moments. "She was beautiful," Catherine said, studying a photo of my parents on their wedding day. "You have her eyes." Everyone always said that. Dad used to joke that I got her eyes and her stubborn streak. Lucky for me. Dinner was a revelation. Dad had outdone himself with Mom's pot roast recipe, and Catherine charmed him completely by asking for seconds and praising his cooking skills. The conversation flowed easily, Dad telling stories about the town's history, Catherine sharing carefully edited tales from her corporate days, and me watching in amazement as two of the most important people in my life connected over shared stories. "So what are your plans now that you're staying in Millfield?" Dad asked as we cleared the table. "I'm still figuring that out," Catherine admitted. "I've been thinking about opening an art studio downtown. There's a beautiful space above, Henderson's bookstore that's been empty for months." "You paint?" Dad's eyebrows rose with interest. "I used to. I'm hoping to get back into it." "That's wonderful. This town could use more culture. Lord knows we've been lacking in the arts department since the high school had to cut their art program." "Really? Why did they cut it?" "Budget constraints. Been trying to raise money to bring it back, but it's been slow going." I could practically see the wheels turning in Catherine's head. "What if we organized a fundraiser? An art show featuring local artists. We could auction pieces and donate the proceeds to the school." Dad leaned forward, intrigued. "You think there are enough local artists to make that work?" "You'd be surprised. I've met 3 painters, a sculptor, and a woman who makes the most incredible pottery just in the few days I've been here. People create art everywhere. They just need a platform to share it." "I like this idea," Dad said, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "I like it a lot." As we moved to the living room for coffee and Catherine's pie, I marveled at how naturally she fit into our family dynamic. She laughed at Dad's jokes, shared her own stories, and somehow managed to mention my mother in ways that felt respectful rather than intrusive. "Jonathan tells me you have some of his mother's recipes," she said as Dad served the pie. "I do. Sarah was an excellent cook. She left behind 3 binders full of recipes, all handwritten with little notes about modifications and substitutions. I'd love to see them sometime, if you wouldn't mind sharing." Dad's expression softened. "I think she would have liked that. She always said food was love made visible." "She sounds like a wise woman." "She was. She would have liked you, Catherine. She always said Jonathan needed someone who could challenge him intellectually and keep up with his big heart." Catherine reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm still working on the keeping up part." After dinner, Dad insisted on showing Catherine his workshop in the garage, where he spent his retirement building birdhouses and refinishing furniture. She admired his craftsmanship with genuine appreciation, asking intelligent questions about his techniques and tools. "You know," Dad said as we prepared to leave, "if you're serious about that art studio idea, I'd be happy to help with any construction work you might need. I'm not as spry as I used to be, but I can still swing a hammer." "That's incredibly generous, Mr. Pierce. Thank you." "Robert," he corrected. "Anyone who makes my son happy gets to call me Robert." In the car on the way home, Catherine was quiet, staring out the window at the passing streetlights. "Penny, for your thoughts," I said. "I was just thinking about how different this feels from the family dinners I'm used to. No pretense, no agenda, just Genuine affection. Dad likes you. I like him too. He's nothing like I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone more suspicious, maybe? More protective? Instead, he's warm and welcoming and obviously proud of you. He's lonely. Has been since Mom died. I think having you there reminded him what it feels like to have family around the table again. Is that what we are? Family? The question hung between us, loaded with possibility and hope. I pulled into my parking space behind the shop and turned to face her. What do you want us to be? Everything, she said without hesitation. I want us to be everything. I leaned over and kissed her, soft and sweet in the glow of the dashboard lights. When we broke apart, she was smiling. So, about that art studio, I said. Are you serious about that? Completely. Why? Because I happen to know the landlord for that space above Henderson's, and I think he might be willing to work out a very favorable lease agreement. Really? And what would I have to do to secure such favorable terms? Well, I said, grinning, you'd have to promise to let me help with the renovations, and maybe teach some art classes to local kids, and definitely let me be your first customer. Deal, she said, extending her hand for a mock handshake. Partners? Partners, I agreed, but instead of shaking her hand, I kissed her palm. In everything. 6 months later, I stood in the doorway of Catherine's art studio, watching her put the finishing touches on a painting of the old cotton mill where we'd first met. The space above Henderson's bookstore had been transformed into something magical. Exposed brick walls lined with canvases, easels positioned to catch the afternoon light, and the sweet smell of oil paints mixing with turpentine. What do you think? She asked, stepping back to survey her work. I think you captured it perfectly, especially the way the light hits the windows. Those windows were the first thing I noticed about this place. Natural light is everything when you're painting. She wiped her hands on her paint-stained apron. Hard to believe we'll be opening to the public next week. The art studio had become more than just Catherine's dream. It had become a community project. Dad had indeed helped with the construction, along with half the men in town who showed up on weekends with tools and opinions about proper wall placement. Ruby donated coffee and sandwiches for the work crews. Mrs. Patterson organized a group of local women to sew curtains for the windows. Even Mr. Henley contributed by refinishing an old cabinet to hold art supplies, but it was the kids' reaction that meant the most. When word spread that Catherine was planning to offer free art classes on Saturdays, 12 children signed up before she'd even finished painting the walls. Watching her teach 8-year-old Susie Morrison how to mix colors, or helping teenage Mark Rodriguez discover he had a talent for charcoal drawings, had shown me sides of Catherine I was still falling in love with. The fundraiser committee called this morning, she said, washing her brushes in the utility sink. We've already sold 43 tickets for the art auction next month. 43? That's incredible. I know. Mrs. Henderson thinks we might actually raise enough to bring back the high school art program and fund supplies for 3 years. She dried her hands and turned to face me. Jonathan, can I tell you something? Always. A year ago, if someone had told me I'd be living in a town of 3,000 people, teaching art classes to children, and planning fundraisers for the local school, I would have laughed. It would have sounded like someone else's life entirely. And now? Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. She walked over and wrapped her arms around my waist. You changed my life, Jonathan Pierce. You changed mine too. Before you, I was just going through the motions. Fix cars, pay bills, repeat. You showed me what it meant to actually live. Speaking of living, she said with a mischievous smile, I have something to show you. She led me to the back corner of the studio, where an easel stood covered with a paint-splattered sheet. With a dramatic flourish, she pulled away the covering, to reveal a portrait that took my breath away. It was me, but not as I saw myself in the mirror every morning. In Catherine's painting, I was working under the hood of a car, my face concentrated and peaceful. She'd captured something in my expression, a sense of purpose, of belonging, that I'd never noticed before. Catherine, I don't have words. You don't need words. I painted it because that's how I see you. Completely in your element, doing what you love. I wanted to capture that moment when you're most yourself. When did you even have time to paint this? I've been working on it for weeks, stealing moments when you were busy with customers. Ruby helped by distracting you with extra-long coffee breaks. I stared at the painting, overwhelmed by the love and attention to detail evident in every brushstroke. It's beautiful. But why show me now? Because I wanted you to see yourself the way I see you before I asked you something important. My heart started pounding. What kind of something? Jonathan Pierce, she said, taking my hands in hers. Will you marry me? The words hit me like a lightning bolt. Catherine, before you answer, let me say something. I know this is unconventional. I know people will talk about the woman who proposed to the younger man. But I also know that I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. I know that I want to spend the rest of my life waking up next to you, building dreams with you, and yes, occasionally fixing cars with you. Catherine, I'm not finished. I know you're probably thinking about rings and traditional proposals and asking my father's permission, except my father's been dead for 10 years, and I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions about who I want to marry. I want to marry you, Jonathan. Not because I need rescuing or because you need taking care of, but because together we're better than we are apart. She was talking fast now, nervous energy spilling out in a rush of words. I know it's scary and I know it's fast and I know that I silenced her with a kiss, deep and thorough and full of every emotion I couldn't put into words. When we broke apart, she was breathless. Is that a yes? She asked. That's absolutely, completely, 100% yes, I said, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around the paint-splattered studio. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I want to build a life with you. Yes to everything. She was laughing and crying at the same time, her arms wrapped tightly around my neck. Really? You're sure? Catherine? I've been sure since that first night at Ruby's diner. I just didn't have the courage to imagine you might feel the same way. Well, I do. I absolutely do. There's just one condition, I said, setting her back on her feet. Her face fell slightly. What? Next time we get engaged, I get to do the proposing. Deal? Next time? She laughed, swatting my arm. How many times are you planning to marry me? As many as it takes to convince you to stay. Jonathan Pierce, I'm not going anywhere. This is home now. You're home. As the late afternoon sun streamed through the studio windows, casting golden light across our entwined figures and Catherine's paintings, I thought about the chain of events that had brought us to this moment. A broken alternator, a stranded Mercedes, a Tuesday afternoon that had changed everything. 6 months ago, I'd been a struggling mechanic worried about paying rent and keeping the lights on. Today, I was engaged to the most incredible woman I'd ever met, standing in her art studio in the town we both loved, planning a future that was brighter than anything I'd ever dared to imagine. Sometimes the best things in life really do happen when you're least expecting them. Sometimes a simple act of kindness, helping a stranger with a broken-down car, can change everything. And sometimes, when a sophisticated woman tells a small-town mechanic that he's young and handsome while she's already 40, it's not the end of the story. It's just the beginning. So, Catherine said, pulling back to look at me with those green eyes that had captivated me from the start. What do you say we go tell your father he's getting a daughter-in-law? I say Ruby's going to have a field day with this news. Let her. I'm done caring what people think about us. Good, I said, kissing her forehead. Because I have a feeling this is going to be the kind of love story people talk about for years. The kind where the woman proposes. The kind where two people find exactly what they didn't know they were looking for. And as we walked hand in, hand out of the studio and into our future, I couldn't help but smile. After all, I was still in the business of fixing broken things. I just never expected one of them to fix me right back. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.